Government is calling on interested home and property owners on the island in a hope of developing the accommodation numbers available that might warrant a second flight, increasing the island's service to twice a week. According to Premier Honourable Tokitala in recent talks with Air New Zealand, and the current flight capacity to the island is a good indication of what can be achieved if more accommodation is available.
We've had preliminary discussions with Air New Zealand last month. We've had discussions between ourselves and the New Zealand government so that we can coordinate our efforts in finalising an agreement with Air New Zealand come October, because that's when the current agreement terminates. Our main objective at the present moment is secure the current weekly service and look at a second service every fortnight, building up to a second service every week with Air New Zealand starting from next year. I'd like to have that available to us by next year. Part of the reasons why I've been so aggressive in trying to get accommodation built as quickly as possible is because we need accommodation stocks before they will consider putting on a second service. So that's what's happening at the present time. It's linked to our developments in accommodation at the present time. And I think I've already pointed out that we're looking at funding from China, we're looking at funding from New Zealand, we're looking at funding from the EU to spearhead some of the accommodation developments we're looking at the present time. How many rooms are we talking about? More than 100 rooms. How many people are we talking about in the long term? Up to 20,000 people a year. Now, that's more than one service, two services, three services a week. But those are the objectives that the government has set itself and the target that set itself so that we can achieve them. Do we have a good chance of getting second service? I believe that we do. If it requires that we pay some incentives, I'm happy to consider looking at providing incentives to enable us to get that second service in place.
As part of this development towards getting an extra service, the government is calling on homeowners to perhaps assist in developing their homes or developing new properties to go towards that. How is that standing at the moment?
Well, as I understand it, we've asked for expressions of interest, so that process will continue. We'll also be asking landowners who have land that is available anywhere around the island that we can use for investors who may be interested in coming and investing in building new accommodation facilities. The Chinese have been here, for example. They've been looking at land areas available at Marae, up at the airport, next to, by the prison, up in Whitlow, on top of Ruvihi, and down at Tawaka, as I understand it. Now, there could be other pieces of land that we could be looking at. So what we want to do is have a register at the present moment of land that is available and surveyed and titled, easily accessible, so that when investors of any kind come to Niue, we'll hand them. The expressions of interest for development of houses by renovating the old hurricane houses, the idea is not new. As you can see, the two houses we've done up in Tonga is a good example of the sort of things we're looking at. But it is, in the end, building up accommodation stock. So and building up a variety of accommodation stocks that we can use for people who may wish to come and stay and visit Niue. One of the things that I'm pleased about at the present moment is that after 3 or 4 years of advertisements and quietly building up Niue as image, we're now starting to get a lot of people talking about Niue as a tourist destination. So I'm pleased about that.
Now, there was talk that government has held talks with one of the villages in regards to developing perhaps an old school in Awasale. Is that true?
Well, the EU at the present moment is looking at assisting village developments, and that's one of the initiatives that we're going to talk to. We've already talked to the Awasale VC. We're going to talk to the VCs as part of the consultations tomorrow, and we're going to determine how we're going to figure this one out. The model for the establishment and development of the business is very clear. I'm reasonably happy with that. We've established that. We know what we need to do. It's now getting agreement from the village councils as well as the other set of village councils for a way forward for the leasing, for the development, for the sharing of the profits and so on. The other thing I should point out is the last EDF, EDF 9, Mudlo, Hakupu and Awasale were the main villages who benefited from this, and a small bit went to Tonga Baka. My belief at the present moment is that those have not been as well managed as they could be, but let's also acknowledge the fact that they're there. The facilities are there, so I'm pleased about that. The Chinese, as I said, were looking possibly up at the prison, and New Zealand, Marabai, as well as the renovation of the houses and so on. So those are the sort of three areas we're talking about. Let me also add that under the GEF, we could very well use some of the funds for adaptation, mitigation against climate change, for development of small hotels, which can be used for evacuation centres. So those are the sort of things that we're talking to people about now. I'm certain that when we put our case to GEF or to European Union and say, well, these become evacuation centres when there is a disaster, they will acknowledge that, in fact, that's a good case, but also they will acknowledge that if it's not being used for anything else, then it should be used for accommodation for tourism. Makes sense. So hopefully those things are going to develop. The only thing that I'd like to add is the fact that we're now building up momentum to the point that we need to ensure that, in fact, we do these things rationally, properly, and with a good plan. We have a plan, but we need to refine it, and therefore we're appointing a committee to assist the government develop those particular plans.
If you wish for more information, you can contact the Niue Tourism Office or Infrastructure Coordinator William Peat.